Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs podcast, the show for founders and experts who want growth without the guesswork. Here we talk about the systems that drive predictable growth, and today we're joined by someone who spent 25 years in engine rooms of major service organizations. Mohammed Khan has built his own proprietary framework from decades of pattern recognition and developed a way of diagnosing performance issues that most operators don't even see. Mo, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, brother. So you spent more than 2 decades in service operations, also in outsourcing. What's the short version of how you ended up in this world?
I worked with a lot of leaders that were primarily trying to navigate the shifts, the inflection points of technology disruption in business. And my main thought process was how to bring innovation, some of the more disruptive ideas to business owners that were trying to evolve into the new marketplace realities. And so over the course of 25 years, I increased my understanding and participation in that process. So, how I landed here was basically building my own proprietary way of doing things by way of synthesizing that 25 years of experience. So, certain principles carry over, certain things that you learn work consistently. And that's how I gotten to this point.
Why don't you share a little bit about your framework, what you're doing, when
Yeah.
do you apply it, what you do, and then the outcomes?
So, for the most part, the vector framework is a structured approach, and it basically builds from a strategic layer all the way up into how the market perceives the value of a business based on how it's operated and run. So, the way that I basically apply the framework is to essentially bring it toward problems that address scalability challenges for businesses, also to some extent bring clarity to a business problem in terms of the root cause of where the problem or the issue or the performance opportunities are. And this mainly applies to businesses that are seeking some kind of differential in how they profit from their venture, how they reach their markets, and how they compete more effectively in the marketplace. So it's a structured approach in terms of looking at the business from the standpoint of how it's operated, how it's structured, the departmental handoffs, and primarily a value chain type of view to how the business operates. So if you look at it from the standpoint of how money comes into the business, how it basically operates throughout the flow of the business itself, then how it delivers an outcome, primarily profit or a customer experience or some operational effectiveness. I look at the business in terms of finding those places within the business that are not operating up to expectations or not optimized for the best service outcome that peer groups and other disruptors are delivering to.
And you have worked with Sony as a major client from your past. What's one story from that chapter that still influences how you operate today?
Well, the interesting thing about the Sony situation was that when we came into the opportunity, I was 1 week into my job. And basically, my boss told me that, look, success or failure of winning this business is on your head. And I mean, I barely really understood the company I was working for, let alone Sony. Sony, for its part, had already made a decision that they wanted to go with a competitor. And at the time, the competitor that we were up against was operating a very sophisticated platform that was slick, was really modernized, and represented the state of the art as far as the technology was concerned. And so, what I did in that situation was I said, listen, we do a lot of work for you today. So, you give us the opportunity, give us 5 days, and we will show you a superior opportunity in which to manage your finance and accounting business. So I pulled together a team of people, primarily a domain expert, an ex-CFO type of person, a quality control person with Six Sigma background, a consultant who had worked in the high-tech discrete manufacturing space, and a finance expert. So I pulled together a team of people, and we got together and we hosted in 5 days a very consultative approach to understanding what was the business basis, how they were set up at Sony Electronics. And what we in effect did was we looked at their business, we looked at how they operated, and we said, look, the answer to this is not a very slick platform. replace your way of doing things. The real answer for you, Sony, is to address the business outcomes. So the technology becomes secondary to that. So what we did was, in effect, we said, listen, we'll improve your working capital. We'll improve your business performance in the sight of Sony at the highest levels. If we show them that we can take your finance and accounting functions and we can deliver superior business value, that would definitely eclipse anything that the competition would be able to offer in comparison. So the takeaway from that, Jay, was it's not about how slick the solution is, how attractive the technology is, just the savings themselves represent as a business case. But ultimately, can you affect an outcome in such a way that the client sees business value in what you're doing? That was the takeaway for me.
Yeah, it ultimately always boils down to the bottom line, but a lot of times it's not ultimately super apparent. It's outside of just the top line revenue and the bottom line profit.
There's also the other element to this, Jay, is I guess another takeaway, not to disrupt what you're saying, but those 5 days in which we worked with Sony's leadership, it gave them a taste of what it's like to work with us. They saw the passion, they saw the degree of intensity, they saw the vision of trying to get to a better business outcome. And that influenced them a great deal. So, in the first case, they went and saw the competition. They saw a very impressive, sophisticated, well organized solution, but they didn't get a sense of what it's like to work with these people. Do they actually care about their business? Do they actually care about them as clients? Working with us for those 5 days gave them the understanding of, okay, these guys, they're genuinely passionate about what they're doing. And it's not about the technology. It's not about the marquee value of the brand that's going to be delivering. It's really about the business focus and what these guys are like to work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some of these talking about pattern recognition. What are some of the blind spots that you see that service companies are missing, or what are their blind spots in regards towards profitability? What are they often overlooking?
When you look at different departments of a business and how they're run to be efficient, typically, and this is a very cliche kind of a thing, but maybe for your audience, they're not aware. Most organizations have very siloed organizational structures. And what ends up happening is there's an agenda for each of these structures. And when you are typically looking at a top line business outcome or performance metric, what ends up happening is that these individual departments don't understand what those higher level metrics mean to them. They're only told whether they're performing or whether they're not. They don't have an understanding of how their particular area of business contributes to the big picture. So the big blind spot here is, let's say if you're the controller or a CFO of an organization and you're held to whether or not your earnings beat the estimates or the forecast was accurate or whether you're in within budget. That's a very high level sort of metric that you're looking at as the CFO. When there are salespeople involved that are selling your product or service to market, when there are finance folks that are basically crunching the numbers, when then there's accountants that essentially make sure that the books are clean, etc. These individual departments don't understand how their part of the flow basically affects the whole big picture. They only understand, okay, work comes in, we have these operating procedures. This is how the work is supposed to get done. Are we doing a good job? We think so. We're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, but they don't understand how their involvement affects the big picture. That's the biggest blind spot to this. So, in my experience as an operator, and I learned this at Microsoft, is that you have to work with these individual departments to say, okay, let's take the big picture and let's boil this down to the things that you can control, which affect the big picture, which affect the total outcome. So let's look at what you do in terms of procedural work, how the process is followed, how it falls apart, how it gets affected when you have dependencies elsewhere. And then basically you break it down for them in words and in terms that they can actually take ownership and then drive the performance. So that's the biggest blind spot.
Yeah, you're right. I've heard this from other guests in the past where people that are in high leadership positions, they make sure that the company's overall mission stays on top of mind through either quarterly meetings, however frequency it is. But the top performing organizations, they all have an overall mission that they're all driving towards, so they know where they actually fit towards achieving that mission. And if you're right, if they're in silos, they're just crunching numbers versus helping us get to the mission, which is a much more deeper drive.
Right, exactly. And, it's also fundamental that people understand that what they're doing is actually more significant than just being held to sort of a standard of, okay, I was doing what I was told to do and how I was told to do it. If they take a degree of ownership beyond that, because they understand their contribution is far more significant. They take a degree of responsibility that goes beyond just the binary yes or no, did I do my job question.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the story that you also shared before, the oil and gas story was quite powerful. Can you walk the audience through that in a simple narrative form, like analysis, discovery, what you did to fix it?
Yeah, so this was an interesting case where a privately held oil and gas company was questioned by the board in terms of how their margins were kind of plateaued. I mean, they had basically operated a multi-billion dollar business and they were given a lot of money to acquire a bunch of different companies. And, theoretically, the board expected the margins to kind of go up as they were scaling their business. And so the timing of it was interesting because when the board was asking, there was a departure of their controller. And the controller just kind of abruptly left. And the board's perception was that, hey, there might be potentially some fraud or some kind of funds that were being siphoned off from the business. And I guess the senior most leadership didn't have enough detail to really investigate. So they brought their accountants in. And their accountants basically do forensic accounting. They do all kinds of audits, and they do, assessments on whether the numbers add up. And but they couldn't address the margin question, right? I mean, if you rule out, as an example, fraud or embezzlement or any other kind of impropriety, the other reasons the accounting firm couldn't account for, they couldn't answer, right? So they reached out to me and they said, okay, we want to make sure our client at this oil and gas company is covered for the board because, I mean, obviously there's a lot of risk of their credibility and potentially displacement. And so they asked me, what else could it be if the margins are flat and basically they're making a lot of money, collecting revenue from different customers and they're doing their part and they think they're running an efficient business. What other reasons could there be? And I said, okay, we have to take a look at how the business is performing in terms of its profitability. We also have to take a look at where revenue leakage might be happening, where there might be some potential inefficiencies in the business. And it also a question of timing. To back to the working capital question. And I think I shared this with you, this analogy that you're selling and theoretically you're going to collect on time, but if you don't and you collect way down the line, effectively you collected, but you didn't do it within the time frame. And so the reporting basically says, hey, guess what? You're not making the money that you should be making. So they retained me, and I basically brought together, again, a crack team of people that have experience in areas of oil and gas and SAP and a number of different things. And then what we did was we pulled all the data out of the systems. And then we took all the data from their business systems. And then we basically did the reconciliation between the two of them. And we said, okay, this is what you sold. This is what you collected. This is the difference. And then we drilled down into the difference to figure out what are the root cause of why this money doesn't seem to be appearing and why I mean, theoretically, the margins should be growing. And what we found is that there were some systemic issues. In other words, there was roughly about 20 to 50% of their invoices were being disputed, were not being collected 100%. And the underlying reasons were that basically the systems that generated these invoices were wrong. Clients disputed them, didn't pay them. Some of them were settled. And so money was effectively blocked or discounted. And therefore, these guys were not seeing the margin increase. What they were seeing is as they were growing and scaling the business, the margins were basically staying flat because they were not effectively operating an efficient cash flow operation. So what we did was we identified the errors, and what we did was we built workflows with audits underneath them so that we could basically capture some of these errors as they were identified proactively before we actually issued invoices. And this, miraculously speaking, corrected the cash flow issue, and we started seeing the benefits of it. So we spent about, I want to say, 3 to 4 months doing the initial diagnostic work, digging into the business, crunching the numbers, taking a look at the patterns. And then, behind all of that, they asked us to come back and actually fix it. So it wasn't just a matter of identifying where the problems were. And so we built workflows for them, and we built real-time reporting systems for them. And that was our initial, maiden journey into the business world. And this was, I want to say, 2018, 2019, in that time frame.
Yeah, almost 5 years ago. Very cool. Okay, so you've solved multiple business challenges or multiple challenges for multiple businesses. What's one of the growth challenges you're facing in your own business now?
For me right now, what's interesting is that I'm learning marketing as kind of like discipline itself. Now, what's interesting is that the most challenging thing about marketing is positioning. And, I've done a lot of content publication just to kind of get a sense from the market, the demographics, the themes, the topics, the angles, and the different ideas that resonate with the market. So what I'm learning right now, and what is a challenge, is understanding the market as it is, not how I want it to be. I mean, in my world, if I go out and sell what I think is what the client wants to buy, but the client is looking for something completely different, or the positioning has to be basically aligned with their interests, that's a process of uncovering what the market wants, and then positioning effectively to it. So it's something that I'm getting better at, and I'm starting to see the numbers are looking a lot better, but I wouldn't say I'm a master of it yet. So that's
Right.
right now.
Yeah, you've taken some good steps though. You've been publishing on LinkedIn weekly for about a year. What do you feel like has been working from your activity there?
What's interesting to me about the marketing, or at least the publications, is the interest that the market seems to have in growth themes, just generally speaking, profitability and what basically makes a business exciting. People aren't as interested in the trends of what's happening in the market. Folks are not as interested in problems per se, and then basically identifying sort of the things that resonate in terms of pain points. I think what people gravitate more towards is insights and identifying certain epiphanies that basically practitioners like myself share with them. And that kind of seems to stimulate the engagement, and also some of the performance that I've seen in terms of content actually reaching the demographics I'm looking for and trying to associate with.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So the market is the one that tells us what tells you what the market needs, right? We can always make assumptions, educated guesses, but ultimately you got to put it out in the market and the market will give you that feedback. So what types of clients are getting the best type of results with you? I guess ICP, what ideal client persona is the type of people that are going to skyrocket after they get your frameworks.
Without a doubt, it's the CFO. I mean, so
Okay.
I've worked with CEOs, I've worked with, as I said, accounting companies and folks that are in partner positions, COOs and the like, but I overwhelmingly feel that there are three personas in particular, and predominantly the CFO. And there's also the PE operating partner, and potentially a VC type of persona that is working with startups and companies that are looking to maybe put some structure behind how they organize their business. But it's predominantly the CFO that I would work with.
And what's the best way for someone to understand your methodology or frameworks before possibly reaching out to work with you?
The best thing to do is to probably on LinkedIn just DM me. And what I would effectively do is host a quick interactive kind of walkthrough of the methodology. I've also got a form that basically they can populate within 15 minutes, and it would give them, by and large, a $50,000 worth of a readout of what a typical consultant would do for them. So if they use my vector form and they answer about 20 questions, which they should have the answers to on a scale of 1 to 5, it'll email them back, and within 1 minute, they'll get a sense of, okay, how do I compare against 1,500 to 2,000 companies out there that do similar things, and how I could potentially make some adjustments that would affect the top line and the bottom line. So those are the two ways that I think I've put myself out there. LinkedIn to, to host interactive sessions, and of course, folks can access the methodology through the forum to get an initial sort of qualification, if you will, to see if it makes sense for us to talk.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, you can find Mo on LinkedIn. His name is Mohammed Khan. He'll have Mo, M-O, in parentheses on his profile. So Mo, you want people, if you want people to reach you, they can find you on LinkedIn. Just a quick DM, just to say hi and kick the conversation off.
Definitely. I mean, I'm always interested in learning more from the market from different points of view. I mean, obviously, this is a discipline that requires me to learn. I'm definitely open to talking to, other passionate individuals that have a vision for what they want to do, and contributing to that would be my privilege.
Absolutely. So you heard it here, folks. If you want to hear more from Mo, find him on LinkedIn, just his name with MO in parentheses. If you like stories like this, if you want to hear from other leaders who are getting the job done, getting it done well, using systems to facilitate growth, be sure to tune in for more. Once again, my name is Jay. Thanks so much for listening. See you again next time.
Thank you.